Wow, this is such a wonderful, wonderful thing to see so many members of our community here. Thank you for coming this evening. I'm going to take just a second and ask you to listen.
Chúng ta có đang nghe không?
Słuchamy?
Szum अपने सांभळीએ છીએ.
Tajný chcesz?
¿Estamos nosotros escuchando?
What you're hearing are 76 different folks in their mother tongue saying, "Are we listening?" This piece is called Are We Listening? 7 years ago, I started this piece. I read an article that there were 6,910 spoken languages in the world, and it took my breath away. I could not believe that there were actually that many languages. And I thought, what can I do to help recognize the language diversity in our world, to celebrate the diversity, and to create something that other people can take a look at and think about? Are we listening, for me, comes from the space that there's so much chatter all the time and we forget to stop to pay attention to one another. But listening also involves talking. And so you can't just sit passively and listen to someone else speak. You need to share your thoughts and your beliefs and your ideals with others too. The homing pigeon I selected for this because the homing pigeon is the only bird that returns home. And so that whole ideal of we come home, Dorothy in her red shoes, there's no place like home. And whether home is a physical place for us or it's in our heart, in our being, I love that whole idea of the homing pigeon returning home. So many people, and every single one of us almost here, I think our ancestors came from somewhere else. And so this piece is about celebrating migration and immigration and all of us moving from place to place, but still maintaining our cultural identity and respecting one another as well. So this series I started, and it's called Listening to Door County Artists. And there's 6 different conversations in this series. And my intention with this was for us to be able to stop and listen to the artists in our community who so often are not heard, that their voices and their ideals and their practices and how they look at the world is really important, but so often we don't get to hear from them because we hear from the bigger organizations. And there's all these worker bees and people who are the roots and the foundation for Door County. And so I celebrate all of you, and I thank you for being part of this conversation this evening. Adam Erickson is going to be our moderator for tonight, and he's the executive director of Peninsula School of Art. I usually introduce people, but Adam has quite the introduction for each of you tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam, and thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. So yeah, I'm Adam Erickson, and I moved up here about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. And when Rebecca called me after having emailed me a couple times, and I'm sorry still that I didn't get back to you right away, it wasn't on purpose. It was just too many emails. I was a little bit nervous because this is a stellar group of artists who have been in Door County for the most part for a long time. And, Rebecca just a minute ago used the phrase, the foundation of Door County. I think that's worth thinking about a little bit. I mean, this place in so many ways is shaped by artists and culture bearers and people who have really made their home and their practice here. And I'm really happy that we were able to have a conversation tonight to listen to these artists. And then at the end, like Rebecca said, we'll listen to you. We'll have a chance to have some questions and some back and forth. So please, be thinking about anything you might want to ask the artists towards the end. And I think, part of the reason that I came to Door County was as I was going through the interview process with the Peninsula School of Art, I started to do a lot of research about Door County and tried to figure out as much as I could about Door County. And one of the things that was really obvious from the get-go was how rich the cultural ecosystem is here. I came from New York, where I spent several years. And of course, New York is often cited as a, mecca for artists. And, it's the center of culture, or had been for a while, holds a lot of weight. However, I'm not sure that per capita, there's as many artists in New York as there are in Door County. So I was really thrilled to kind of find out about this place. And as still the newbie here up on the stage, I'll be listening as much as I can to these folks throughout the night, and I'll pepper the evening with some questions here and there. But the 8 of us all got together last week, and so we got a chance to kind of connect and talk about some things that were on the top of people's minds. And so I'll bring some of that discussion into our big discussion with all of you tonight. It is, it's Rebecca kind of the first thing that I came to here in this space was around economic development, and I'm just going to say a couple words really quickly, and then I'll get to introductions. It's a well-known, widely accepted fact that the cultural industry in Door County is a heavy economic driver. And just in case you're not aware, the nonprofit arts and culture industry generated $38.6 million in economic activity in 2022, $38.6 million, and supported over 700 jobs. That is really huge in Door County. And again, I think a lot of people know this and understand this and value arts as an economic driver. And I think it's not just about the economics either. And we're not going to talk a lot about the economic side of this tonight, I don't think. We'll see. But I think the arts are really a vital part of our civic and social life in community. They're part of our social infrastructure, and they can help reduce social isolation, bring people together, bridge divides. Those are some of the things that are kind of intangible when it comes to art and culture, but I think that we find that in Door County. The last thing I'll say before I introduce our panelists is that we're here tonight to listen. And we have the opportunity to hear from 7 really extraordinary artists who each in their own way has contributed to the vital and vibrant culture of Door County that we all benefit from. So the panelists gave me permission to give very, very short bios. It's going to be like 1 line each, but just to give you a sense of where they're coming from, what kind of practice they have. And the reason that we're doing that, rather than me going through all of the awards and honors, it would take 4 hours to get through that with this group of people. And so you can find more information on everybody online, and you can certainly visit their galleries. Many of them have galleries. So without further ado, to my left, Dan Cross is a multimedia artist using paint, photography, and digital media. His work is shown locally at his own gallery, Idea Gallery in West Jacksonport. And next to Dan is Deanna Clayton. Deanna has worked as a studio artist, focused on glass as a sculptural medium for over 30 years. She's the owner of Deanna Clayton Glass, based in Juddville. And then Nathan Hatch. Nate is a designer, builder, and sculptor. He's also an educator and business owner of Nathan Hatch Art, based in Bailey's Harbor. He grew up the son of 2 artists in Door County. And Margaret Lockwood. Margaret is a painter and owner of Margaret Lockwood Gallery right here in Sturgeon Bay. And she's been living and working in Door County for 30 years. And importantly, especially to me, she ran the Peninsula School of Art with her husband, Alan, in the late 90s. So I'm a direct beneficiary of hers. And then next to Margaret is Jeremy Popelka. Jeremy's a glass artist who's worked in the field for over 40 years. He's the co-owner of Popelka Trenchard Glass in Sturgeon Bay, and also an art educator involved with projects around the world. Next to Jeremy is Suzanne Rose. Suzanne is an artist and fine art photographer based in Northeast Wisconsin. Her work remains close to her Midwestern roots and explores memory, metaphor, purpose, and place. And last but not least, Tony Staroska. Staroska. Sorry, I practiced that, Tony, and I still didn't get it right. Tony is a wonderful visual artist and co-owner of Juddville Contemporary Studio and Gallery. He's been a working studio artist for 53 years and is also an art educator working with young people. So I feel like I'm taking up a lot of the mic time right now, but I promise once we get into the conversation, I'll be very much on the sidelines. We're just going to have a casual dialogue tonight and save some time, as we've said, for questions at the end. I'd like to start our evening actually tonight by asking each of the artists to share one word, just something that you're bringing into the room with you tonight. And so that could have to do with your art practice. It could have to do with something that you hope we'll dive into tonight, or it could be a feeling or emotion that you're sitting with. And I just thought it might be nice for us to kind of all be humans together and just kind of have a moment where we're reflecting on what we're bringing in tonight. And I will start just to kind of kick things off. The word that came immediately to mind for me when I thought about this evening is placemaking. And that's because whether it's 53 years or 5, every one of these folks has generated extraordinary works of art, but also has really influenced this place, and this place and this community have benefited from the creative contributions that you all have made in building community, growing the local economy, and making Door County known as a top arts destination. So without further ado, I'm gonna start passing the mic, and you don't have to explain your word. You can just say your word if you like, but we'll just start with Dan.
Community.
Hope and anticipation.
Inspiration. Thank you, Rebecca.
Synchronicity.
Sanctuary.
Hope.
Thanks, everyone. So I'm gonna have a mic down here. We have 2 other mics, and we'll just kind of pass them around as we're going through questions. So thanks for doing that with the one word. I think it's just kind of an interesting way to start, and I'm glad to hear the word hope and several other words. So one of the other words that came to mind was gratitude for me. And I wanted to kick things off with a question that Dan was reflecting on a few days ago, which feels really like the basis for this entire evening's discussion, which is what makes Door County a haven for artists. And Nate had also commented that the community kind of gives artists permission to live and work. And so I'd love to hear from Dan what makes Door County a haven for you and for artists. And then Nate and anyone else can jump in after that.
I've lived up here now for 18 years and had our gallery for 8. And my word, community, really is about all the arts that are here and how they're integrated in a way that is really special. A congregation of musicians and actors and visual artists and poetry writing centers. It's incredible with the small area that the peninsula is. The vitality is beyond anything that I've ever experienced. And it's that small knit community, that when we started our gallery, there were other gallery owners that were really supportive in sending, their customers our way, and there's not that competitiveness that really you don't find that anywhere. The big city you want. So this sense of community and involvement and helping each other, I think that's why artists come here. It's very unique, and it's a given, the natural beauty that inspires all of us, I think.
Do you want me to go next?
Yeah, anyone can jump in. Hey, if you want.
Sure. I think growing up here, you see it, so it becomes something that you can strive for, and that it becomes like a real, it becomes a real career. You see it, and if you don't see it, you can't be it. I know that kind of is cliche, but I feel that the community here gives you permission to jump in with both feet without any stigma of declaring yourself an artist, and they're unapologetically supportive of it. So that's kind of how I've always felt growing up here, and I'm very thankful for that.
I was going to say, when I moved here, this area is a strong entrepreneurial community, so they can understand what it is for an artist to be an entrepreneur and vice versa. So immediately you're making fast friends with all kinds of people doing all kinds of work, and everybody supports each other because we all get it.
Yeah, I think on that note, pass. I'll talk very loud.
Jeremy, for the recording.
Okay, all right, so I'll talk less loud. Moving here with Stephanie in 1997, it was sort of a clean slate for us, and we didn't necessarily know where to start, but I think the identity of Door County also is kind of open-hearted. This is a business center, but these burn marks you see on the floor of this room is where my glass studio was in 1998, 99, 2000. Where I'm sitting was about 2,000 degrees because the furnace was right here. And so I would have never have dreamed living in California that I would end up in an incubator for business when we moved here. I imagined a barn and some idyllic countryside place with sheep. But I think the fact that they were open-hearted here to the idea of an artist coming in here without, knowing necessarily if I had the capabilities of building a blast furnace safely, they just trusted it, and they trusted the idea. So trusting the arts, I think, is sort of an underlying concept here.
I guess 30 years ago, I can just echo not knowing anybody, just being somebody that had been coming up for 20 years with family. It didn't take long, and everybody, all the other artists were so supportive. I just have never felt so welcome, and I really never will forget that. It made it easier to do my art and easier to open my little schoolhouse, which is now Tony and Rebecca's in Juddville. You guys? Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thanks all for the insights. The other thing that I wanted to just kick things off with is Suzanne and I were talking last week, and she made reference to wishing for an opportunity to have a walk with Georgia O'Keeffe, and it was sort of a reflection on just kind of. I'll actually ask Suzanne to explain it, but I think what was connected to that statement was demystifying the domestic lives of artists. And could you say more about the Georgia O'Keeffe walk and why demystifying domestic life is important?
I went to the School of the Art Institute, and the way that I used to get to class was I'd take the train downtown, and then I would cut through the Art Institute. And if you were a student, you could cut through early before the doors were open to the public. So I would be like running to like my 8:30 studio class with like my stuff, and I would make sure that I would take a route that I would go past the Georgia O'Keeffe clouds. And so I would run upstairs and then run downstairs and run through the armory. You know, you guys have all done it. And I would do that over and over and over again. And I got to the point where I almost like needed to see the O'Keeffe. And at that time I was really conflicted. Like I wasn't quite sure if I had like a love-hate relationship with Georgia at that time. And then the more that I got to know her because of the collection of the Art Institute, but then also the subsidiary supporting works by like Ansel Adams and Stieglitz and things of that nature. And then of course all of the other painters like Martin Hartley. And like I started seeing the ability to have an artistic life through the way that she lived. And I did a deep dive. And I really got into Georgia O'Keeffe. And, you know, there's this, we all know the photograph of her walking one of her chows on like a, what looks like a mound. She's like walking along it, and it's at dusk. And that was something that I visualized that I wanted to have in my life, is walking. And when my husband and I transplanted up here from Chicago, we were probably the only people that moved up here that had no clue that this was an artistic community. We actually came up here because we were able to write a check for a farmhouse. And unlike in the neighborhood that we lived in, we couldn't even like round up enough for a mortgage for a dump in Chicago. So we're like heading out, and we packed up all of our stuff. And then I started walking. And Georgia came with me while I walked. And it really became a powerful move on my part, because then I started really understanding her life. And her life was like a template for mine. And it was just Midwestern, not Southwestern. So.
I'd like to make a comment about
Please.
the Art Institute. When I was a teenager, I used to go to the Art Institute every weekend. And at the time, Rodin's sculpture of Adam was in a circular staircase. And I would sit on that and I would draw it from up down, here, and here. I must have drawn it 50, 60 times. And the paintings there, Brancusi, his sculptures, I fell in love with art there. Well, I fell in love with art before then. And I went to an industrial school where they said boys can't take art. But I could go down to the archives at the Art Institute and get a Rembrandt and copy it. And my weekends there as a teenager were just wonderful. I just couldn't say enough about it.
Thanks, Tony. I think there's something in there about just kind of the everydayness, if I can sort of make up a word, of the artistic practice and life. I mean, both you and Suzanne kind of referenced, you going down to an archive and pulling a print or walking past a Georgia O'Keeffe. Like, you're on your way to, in Suzanne's case, you're on your way to someplace else, but you made a point of kind of interacting with that, and then it sparked something in you. And I think that there's something interesting about living in a place like Door County, where we do have so many artists, and also it's a fairly small community. I mean, I think the year-round population is 28,000 or something like that. And so we have the opportunity to think of artists also as our neighbors. And people who we see out walking, or someone who we might run into in the grocery store. And I sort of like the idea that we can think of artists that way, because in big cities sometimes artists are kind of thought of as the magical fairies or unicorns, and they go off and do their creative thing, and then it shows up in a gallery somewhere. But there's a personal connection here, I think. Does that resonate with anyone? Am I right, wrong? I'd love to hear.
Just the normalness of it. Yeah. I was going to say just the normalness of it. But then sometimes you sort of take it for granted. like growing up, I thought everybody had a loom in the house. Like, where's your loom? Where's your? You don't have a wood shop in the backyard. You don't. Where's the kiln? Please direct me to the kiln. And I thought that I just, for the longest time, just thought that was normal. Everybody had that in their house, and so I don't know. Just another nice memory to bookend what Tony was talking about.
Just you saying that, I realized I totally take it for granted. Like, it didn't even occur to me, but it's absolutely true. Constantly surrounded.
Yeah. So we're gonna just talk a little bit about the effect of living here, since we're sort of talking about life in Door County. The question that I'd love to ask, both Suzanne and Margaret surfaced this question about how does living in Door County does it have an impact on your work, and if so, how? So if we could dive into that, we'd love to hear responses.
Just a simple comment. I'm working in my studio and I call my friend Stephanie and she comes over and critiques my work. You know, you think everything looks horrible the week before a show and she talks you off the ledge and tells you, no, it's all good. So.
In 1994, before that, Alan and I lived in St. Louis, and I was mostly painting. They were kind of atmospheric tables with kind of still life objects, and I was interested in the underneath the table atmosphere. And then coming to Door County, moving here, the table legs turned into trees. So the tree paintings that I do really started with like a still life setup with a table, which is kind of interesting in a way. But I'm interested in creating that a place you want to be, a space, a welcoming space. So definitely, Door County changed really what my whole spirit in what I painted really was. Yeah.
At the same time, I think people like Margaret moving here, you know, it keeps things fresh. I mean, things can get really insular up here, and I feel like the idea of new ideas and people that are coming from different backgrounds has really increased since we moved here. And places like the art school are integral in that, and Rebecca coming from Arizona, all that new, fresh life into it brings new ideas and also a reality, you know, an embracement of contemporary art as well, which, you know, I think sometimes Door County gets a bad rap as being provincial, but I think it's changed a lot since we moved here. For me, it was just like sanity. I mean, I was 37, and it was in California, you would spend several hours a day in traffic, which if you can use that to your advantage if you can write in your head. But it really, once we had children, this was sort of an escape. And the funny thing was, in the late at the change of the century, people were finding isolated places to get ready for the Armageddon. Yeah. And so it wasn't exactly why we came here, and I knew there were people that went to my kids' school that were coming up here getting ready for Y2K, if you remember that. So we were escaping something. It's also sort of like you're away from some of the issues that are affecting so many people. The pandemic, I mean, was there a pandemic up here? Sometimes I wonder, because the PTSD, when I would talk to friends from the city, was really relevant. And when I coughed in Chicago once, I thought I was going to get beat up. So I think you kind of get into that lifestyle that maybe, you know, for me, it was coming back to a bucolic place where my kids could grow up like I had, in a way that was less crazy, you know, and at the same time, you know, eventually everything catches up to everywhere. So I always say we're 30 years behind here, for better or for worse, and I still believe that.
Anyone else want to chime in on that one? We're good? All right. So one of the other things that came up in our conversation last week was really just kind of around the purpose of art, I guess. I sort of collated a few questions, but we talked a little bit about process, ideas, beauty, or making statements. And one of the things that Tony prompted us on was, do you make profound statements or simply create beauty in the world? And another spin on that, the purpose of art, came from Deanna. How does process influence the content of your work, or how does content influence the process? And I'd love to do a bit of a deep dive with everybody. I mean, take whatever parts of those questions you want, but what are you after, in your work?
My work it started with process because it's not a process that's taught in college. It's something that I learned from experimentation, and it has a very beautiful, delicate look to it, but it's actually very strong. And I like an ephemeral quality to my work. We're impermanent. I do a lot of figurative work now, and they look delicate and strong all at the same time. I don't make big statements with my work. I make my work to get through my life. It's usually reflective of what I'm going through at the time, and that's, just maybe the color I use in a piece is about what I'm going through. And what I hope to do with my work is just to inspire somebody else to look at it and to feel something special, spiritual, human, basically. Yeah.
I would like to give a plug for UWGB, where we built a kiln named Martha. And we were in a warehouse like this. They hadn't built the school yet. And Bruce Grimes was teaching there, and Tom Tosh, who else was there? David Damkohler. All these teachers, we were in this warehouse, and because they hadn't built the school, they just dropped bricks on the back deck and said, if you want kilns, build them. And boy, did we build kilns. And some of them were failures, and some of them were remarkable. But we were there. I went to some prestigious schools, and I don't feel like I learned much. I learned more at UWGB than anywhere. And it was the opportunity to work, and it was about work ethic. And Bruce Grimes was an incredible teacher when it came to fundamentals. Push those fundamentals, push them. And I feel that was just such a great advantage. When I left there, I really wanted to apprentice myself. Nobody would take me. I couldn't give my work. I said, I'll work for free. No. So I had to open my own studio over in Eagle River. But just a wonderful opportunity. And one of the things about that last question was a whole group of us artists used to meet every Saturday till COVID. And I had this group, and we'd meet here for coffee and there for coffee every Saturday. And we might talk about baseball games, we might talk about art, we might talk about, anything. But we were all part of this community, and it's a wonderful thing.
I'll talk about the process end of it. I really haven't done work that's political oriented. And I've been coming up here like many people, 20 years, the last 30 years. I came up as a kid. Well, I've been coming up since I was 2 years old. So what happens over the course of time is that the county and the beauty and the serenity, all the different qualities of water, watch movement, all that plays into the process of my work. And I don't usually start out knowing what I want to do. is that I'll let it take me someplace. And I work a lot in the abstract realm in mixing medias, and they have a tendency to reflect, well, recently the escarpment and the rock formations, and I've integrated lots of different media from clay to photography to oil painting, all things that I've trained in. But it's really a process for me, and it all stems from Door County.
I thought about that question, and at first I thought, I don't really have a process. But then I realized, yes, I do have a process. First thing is I decide what size I want to make it. I stretch the canvas. I put a layer of somewhat orange, yellow, bright red, some kind of bright color. And that is a process, because that's what I always do. But it doesn't sound like much of a process, but I always do. And then that's when, then we talked about the idea, right? That's when the idea comes, is when I'm communicating with what I've already put down, probably much like other people here. But yeah, and the question of, am I making a statement or is it simply beauty? At first I thought, well, beauty isn't simple. To me, that's what I love. I love beauty, I love light, I love the atmosphere. So I guess I wouldn't say this or that, because I would say beauty would be as good a statement as any.
Nate, you want to say something?
I think I bounce back between a lot of bodies of work, some that's more personal and some that's more commercial. But I think underneath it all, I'm definitely more process-based. When it comes to like steel sculpture, I like the spontaneity of being able to like put it together fast and try something, but then also you're working with a material that has the steel that is very permanent to it. So there's sort of this juxtaposition of the looseness and the permanentness that you're almost like doing like these practice drawings in 3D. And it's like rapid prototyping, rapid sketching as you're building and subtracting and then adding back on, because you have this ability to make these changes and make these modifications without losing anything structurally. And I think that's something I always come back to with process and the sort of the reverence, something that I should have chimed in before with how does Door County affect our work. I think there's a reverence for material and process that exists here, and we have access to it. And again, you can see it so you can be it because you've seen others do it before you. And just, again, having the industrialness of this area along with the arts, it becomes, you're an artist who has access to industry. And that's kind of where the magic is, at least for me, or kind of easier to get into trouble that way.
For those who aren't artists, and we talk about process, and I work in series, and sometimes 2 or 3 at a time. But from that abstractness, you do a piece and you reflect on it. Where did that come from? And if recently the escarpment, the first piece that I did, once I saw that, I continued and I did 4, 5, 6 more of those. And I think that's a real difference between starting out with the idea and letting the process lead you into other ideas.
Yeah, Suzanne, I was going to ask. Yeah, please. Yeah, I just wanted to see like if you had any response to like the role of beauty or beauty as content in your work, or anything about process.
Well, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, I tend to like really like banged up things. I like things that have been semi-destroyed. I see a lot of myself in that. So I really gravitate toward things that have been broken. But I think that this area for me is I was able to find my voice as a photographer here. And I went into school as a painter. And I came out as a designer. I made furniture for 35 years, but then in the in-between, I slid in photography. And I did it in a way that I felt it was so intimate and so private that I was able to do it in a way that I felt very, very unseen and very unjudged. And I like that about my work. And I continue to work that way. I'm a very private, my studio is very private. My process is very private. And it has a lot to do with, like how Margaret had mentioned, she has a canvas before her and she's visualizing possibilities. Is that correct? And for me, I visualize the body of work completed. I mat it, I frame it, I get it on the walls, and I even choose my venue. And I will think about that process, and then I'll rotate things and migrate new ideas in. And I do this all while I'm on walks. I've had many dogs over the last 30 years living up here. It's the benefit of living in Door County, not the city. And I walk constantly. I walk usually very early morning. I get out before dawn, or I'll walk at the end of the day into dusk. And it's my two favorite times of day, being very, very fair and not liking sunscreen. So that was the start of it. But the genesis of the whole of my ideas come from these walks, and on these walks, and I do I work in my head, and then I make a plan. And I get out there and I'll test and I'll do ideas, and then and sometimes they're shelved, and other times I go forth, and sometimes they take years, and other times they only take a month or two. And I've really enjoyed that process, but I think that nature has really given me a voice here. It's illustrated my voice, actually. Door County has illustrated that. And I think that also that I've photographed it and walked it so much that I feel so tethered to this place in a way that sometimes I feel tethered to the earth, and other times I feel almost tethered to the sky. It kind of inverses back and forth depending on what my focus is. And then what happened is, as I started working and started walking, I got to know weather. And living here is so much about the weather. And I realized that there's these two entities. It's the land and it's the weather. And they're two different presents for me. And one has been an echo of my own community. Let's call it something solid, something relative, something relevant to me. But weather has been a teacher. And learning from weather, and not only storms and rain and snow, but also seasons, and being present within that I feel that I can be with my teacher every day. And the poetic qualities of this place, which can be scrappy, which can be ordinary feeling, it can be restrictive, so many different things. But I'll find that the stone, the escarpment is huge, the trees, the land, and then also the residences of the people. And because I'm Southern Door centric, I'm more of this like rural farmland presence. And I really love the fact that I have then discovered, walking all of the nature trails from Washington Island all the way down to Kewaunee and back again, I found sanctuary. And I feel that the sanctuary not only exists in the land and in the people and the hearts of this place, but it also exists, like I've constructed it within. And I'm able to take that wherever I go now. And Door County has given me confidence to work and follow my quirky, kind of unreverent kind of approach to things. And I thank Door County for that. And I wouldn't have had that in the city And I really feel very privileged to live here.
Yeah, thank you. I love the imagery of kind of being tethered here, and that feels really relevant. Jeremy, I lost track of my count here. Did you answer that question? Because I feel like you must have something to say about process, beauty.
Well, first of all, I apologize because, I'm the biggest carbon burner you'll find in the arts. And I'm kind of a dinosaur, I think. And, it's part of the education I had, and that, environmental issues were sort of secondary. But now my field is really confronting a lot of those issues. So it's kind of a thing that keeps me up at night often, flying airplanes or taking a flight somewhere or blowing glass. It's all sort of damned in the end some ways. So I try to be responsible that way and try to make it work. So my process can be having reverence to what I'm using in terms of fossil fuels to accommodate my desire for glass, and then also my heritage, which is at least 4 generations of artisans. And so I kind of rely on that history of my great-grandfather coming from Prague and being a blacksmith in Racine, and through my grandfather, a silversmith, and my father, an artist, all kind of connected to the Art Institute in one way or the other, as a continuation, as something that I needed to work in fire in some way, that I did have a natural affinity to it, and that when I go in the morning and my furnace is running, it's sort of a relationship to a deity in a way, because you're beholden to that material and that information that's been handed down to make glass. But at the same time, you're trying to justify it, whether it's through education, through looking for different ways to make it more legitimate in the 21st century. So process is complicated in glass because you're really facility based in so many ways. And, wherever we go, we have to kind of talk about that. So as I get older, it's becoming, an overwhelming thing about, I think doubt is also part of it. I think you have to question yourself a lot. I think validation is important. What you say is so true, but, you have to also kind of question your methods at times as well.
Thank you.
I am also polluting the earth with my process.
Do you want to say any more about that, Tony? This is turning into a confessional. So.
Well, one thing I want to say about process is I work mostly in clay. I've done bronze and I've worked in a lot of different mediums over the years, but mostly clay, but I'm not a potter. Rebecca works in clay. She's not a potter. And what gave me freedom for the first 10 years that I worked, I was a functional potter. I could sell a mug. I could sell a bowl. Here, $6, $3, give me the money. And then after I did that for 10 years, I thought, I'm either quitting or I'm going to do this differently. And the thing about being a functional potter is you're dealing with form and function, just like a furniture maker. Form and function. And I decided I was going to forget about function. And that left me freedom to do anything I wanted to do. My pieces are full of rips and tears and bangs, and I hit them with 2x4s, and I have such freedom. And I'm more interested in the abstract qualities of the pieces. And it's not that I made a few mugs again this last year, but normally I don't do that kind of thing. But that whole process for me, I have done one based upon the cliffs of Door County. I've done one on abstract birds, whatever comes to my mind. Kandinsky is not even one of my favorite artists. I did this whole series on this guy's work. And what I did was I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, thought of him, got up the next morning and said, I'm going to see if I can do his work without looking at it. So I made all these pieces, and when I was done with them and fired them, I looked at them and I thought, well, that's not bad. But for me, in order to keep going, it's got to be about ideas. you just, I mean, you get these ideas and you just follow them. And right now I've got 2 4-foot pieces in a 28-inch kiln. So it's all stacked with things to make a fire. And maybe it turned out, maybe it didn't.
Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate it, everyone. It's so fascinating to hear you all talk about the process and weaving in, you know, some ways that Door County influences the process, even in the content of the work. But Tony kind of talking a little bit about ideas and ideas driving work made me think about art and education. And, you know, as somebody who works for an organization here that offers over 2,800 hours of instruction to about 1,000 people of all ages and abilities, art education is really important to me. And I was really struck that in our conversation and also in each of your bios, many of you have worked with young people or worked as teachers. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about how that informs your practice, your artistic practice, if it does, or how you think about that part of your own kind of life.
Well, I guess I'll have to just start with an experience that goes way back to when Abe Cohn had the Potter's Wheel, when I was about 11 years old. And on every Wednesday from 1 to 4, we'd do demonstrations. And my mom, because my dad was in education, we pretty much were up here all summer long. She would drop me off on Wednesday, and I would just sit and watch. I wouldn't ask questions, maybe a little shy at that time. I did this for about 3 years. And that was probably one of the most profound effects on me. And that's education, you know, giving of yourself. And so I've been very conscious of that with the gallery and trying to encourage, you know, young kids. And when a parent brings, a child in, I'll ask them, I'll go around, what's your favorite piece? You come back and we'll look at both the galleries. And then I'll ask them why. And it's amazing. And so I think that's very integral to being an artist, sharing how we see, how we enjoy art, how we make art. And it's really important that I think we do that as artists.
Okay, I'm not going to get woo-woo on you, but I talked to a psychic one time, and they told me I was a teacher at heart. And I was like, she doesn't know what she's talking about because I don't teach anything. And then I got on Facebook drinking some wine, and I said, hey, let's drink wine and make glass bowls. And that was 5.5 years ago. And I teach classes on the regular. And what I love about it is I do this simple project. I give the same instructions every time, and they're always different. And there's been hundreds of them. And I'm inspired by that. And people think they can't do it, and they can. And I also learn a lot about color theory from people. Things that I'm like, wow, we'll see how that goes. And it's actually awesome. And then I use it.
Well, I currently work at Gibraltar. I head up the tech ed department, and my focus is teaching industrial processes through art and design. And there's only 2 weeks left of class, which is why my word was anticipation that got started, because I'm going to be going from my 40 hours a week to shepherding other people's projects along, to going back into the studio full-time and shepherding my own concepts along. And which when I'm doing one, I miss the other, and then when I'm switch back to doing that other one, I miss the one that I had just left. I find teaching very fulfilling, but I find my studio time very precious and very needed, very much.
I got a teaching certificate when I was 50 years old to teach high school art. I would go and do workshops in schools, and my favorite was kindergartners and first graders. Put the handprint in there, write your name on it, and Mom will love forever. And but one thing I noticed that so many of the programs were really lacking in just fundamental art elements. How much tissue paper and pipe cleaners can you use? And so I set out I thought, well, we can teach fine art. So like in my ceramics program, the first thing the kids did was dig their own clay. They made their own tools. Then they did pit firing. Then they did Sager firing. And then I was in Mesa. And I go to Mesa Art Center and I could trade, okay, I'll do whatever the empty bowls for you if you let me use your salt kiln. So then they do a salt firing. Then we do raku firing from converted electric kilns. And my drawing and design was just tedious. The kids hated me for the first 6 weeks. No, that's not dark enough. Darker, darker. This is what value is. This is what line is. And they didn't realize that they were learning how to draw. They were doing this thing and this thing and this thing. And then one day I put a ball, a box in a kiln or a cone and say, draw it. And they say, well, we don't know how to draw. I said, well, you do. Where do you start? Oh, closest point to me. There's a dynamic value change. And there's a subtle value change. And they go, oh my God, I can draw. And I ended up doing it for 6 or 7 years. And when I started choking kids, I knew it was time to quit. But it was a wonderful experience. And it was just a great time.
For glass making, thanks, Tony. Because I can relate to that because if you're in glass, it's facility based. So your dream is to get a teaching job with a glass program and then worry about how you're going to teach later. So after I got my graduate degree at California College of Arts and Crafts, I was hired there for 4 years as an associate, and I just wasn't really ready to teach. And I tried my best. I would ask Stephanie for suggestions for curriculum, and she would help me with some ideas. And it was always kind of a struggle. I tried to share as much as possible, be open-hearted, but I wasn't completely able to separate myself from the teaching. I had such a personal investment in everyone's success that if I had students making bongs, it would depress me for a year to this date, and the strangling part came in there too. So, but later you just don't realize this is to everybody that's out there considering teaching. You don't realize how you affect people, and all that time, even though I felt like it was a struggle, was validated years later when a few of my students looked me up, or I'd connect with them through dreaded social media, and there was a lot of memories I forgot of things I had done that had shaped their lives. And even doing workshops up here, we've had over 1,000 people take glassblowing workshops with us in 25 plus years. And crazy things happen. Like I was at Terry's gallery and David's gallery in De Pere, and a guy came up to me during the show, and they were showing work of an incarcerated individual that was championed in the Portrait Society gallery show in Milwaukee, and there was a little show that they had of one of the artists. And this young man came up to me and he was like, Jeremy, do you remember me? I took glassblowing 20 years ago, and it was so great. It was so amazing, but I got incarcerated. I got busted for marijuana, and I ended up going to federal prison. And now I'm making art through this program started by the Portrait Society Gallery project. And he didn't forget that. It's a little thing you do and how important it is. And what you're doing at Gibraltar is going to have such a long-lasting legacy. You can't imagine. You think it's sometimes like wait till summer, but the people you're touching at that level, they're just sponges. And they're always going to remember what you've given them.
I think I should just really mention quick too. I've taught at all the schools here in Door County and led my own workshops, but I think the most gratifying workshops that I've done is through the Hardy Gallery. They have an ETC FOG program, and Vinnie's here tonight. She is the heart and soul of the program, along with Sarah from the Hardy. And I've demystified analog photography for many years, and then when the darkroom closed at Gibraltar, then we eased into digital, and we make photographs, and these kids leave with an armful of photographs that have been locked into their iPhones, and it's like Christmas for them every time, and it's so fulfilling because I can have 2 kids, or I could have 18 kids, and I make sure that every single one of them has a photograph in their hand when they leave. And I have people come up to me at Target, oh, Mrs. Rose, I still have that in my bedroom, or my grandma has it, or and I have these kids coming from everywhere. And so I would just want to thank Vinny for all of your hard work and the contribution that you've given to Door County. Yeah, pretty amazing. Yeah. She's a teenage whisperer. Yeah, she's magical. Thank you for that.
Everybody on this panel has volunteered countless hours, and you beat me to the punch if I was talking about Vinny and Fog. But I've taught photography there, I've taught graphic design and painting. But it's really, I think it's vital to this community that as artists that we do that. And one of the things that we implemented, I think in our 3rd year at the gallery, is that we started workshops. And it was more from the educational standpoint. Well, we started with 2. The next year we went to 3, and now we're up to like 7 for this year. And I really enjoy seeing people come in that we try to make our classes or workshops that you don't need any experience at all. And people are usually afraid. I said, oh, don't. These instructors are fabulous. And so I think it's a real testament to Door County and how many artists volunteer their expertise.
I would like to say, I'm thinking of all the places where I don't know if I'm teaching or just giving them an experience, kind of a workshop-y thing, but I'm thinking Jack's Place. I've for quite a long time, I weekly would go and conduct an art group there, and Boys and Girls Club. I did some things, and I don't know if you know Turning Point. They've come, and it's just enriches. I have things that I've kept that they give me. They give you their artwork. So I have like a portrait of me done by somebody else, and I look at that all the time. During the pandemic, it was right after the pandemic, a family came in, a young boy about 12, and he had a picture, and it was like trees kind of, but very, very abstract. And he said that he had, his teacher in Milwaukee had shown a video of me painting, and I thought, what? But I had no idea. So, it feels good to have your work taken or understood a little by somebody else in their own interpretation, I think.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to do one last question, and I'd love to start with Tony at the end and just go down the row here, and then we'll turn it over to all of you for any questions you have. This was a conversation and sort of a topic that came up, and I think Jeremy posed it originally, but I hear echoes of it in this conversation and in other conversations. What does legacy mean to you?
Legacy is what we're all about. When I lived in northern Arizona, I had to get away from Don Wrights, who was a very famous potter here in Wisconsin. And so I moved to northern Arizona, and a year later he moved there too, and we were neighbors. By then, Wisconsin was full of a lot of bad copies of his work, and I just needed to get away. But by the time he came there, it was okay. and we were good friends. What was the question?
Legacy.
Legacy. Okay, that's part of my legacy is carrying on. I did his portrait when I moved. I took a teaching job and I moved and I did his portrait and I hung it on his door and I drove away. And all of these things, the people whose lives I've touched and you touched and we touch each other, that's important. You know, somebody will say, "Oh, I bought this from you 30 years ago." When I go back to the Eagle River area where I had my first place, I'll go into some house in Three Lakes and say, "Oh, there's a pot I made in 1972." But that legacy is important, and we hope that it's going to go on. And I want to use this moment to say this. I want all you people to look at us, because this life is disappearing. The kids are $100,000 in debt when they get out of school now, and they can't buy a $300,000 house. We had $1,200, put it down on a dump, and we started our studios. Mine was a welding shop in a little house. And we're all aging out, and the kids can't replace it. We've got to figure out a way to get some young artists here, and I don't know the answers.
Well, like a nerd I am, I just looked up legacy just to see the definition of it, just so I could see if there was some way to wiggle around this. But I started thinking about a while ago, and I got into a conversation with the current curator at the Miller Art Museum here in Door County. And I was speaking with Helen, and we had a really interesting conversation about legacy. And I became very hyper-focused since 2020 to start really focusing on grounding my work in a place that is where the work was generated from. And I think that the Miller is such an amazing institution here in our county, and it's so unique and it is so interesting. And we have a former director here, and we have the current director here, and they have really brought the Miller into the 21st century. And I think we're all benefiting from it. And I hope that everyone on this panel is in the collection. And if not, everyone needs to have a conversation with Elizabeth. And I think that the Miller, for me, is my local legacy. And I feel so privileged to be part of their collection. And I also feel very privileged that I had participated in a show by Cheryl Stidwell Parker that was a portrait show. She invited me many years to participate in it. And all of the portraits, every year that I participated, I think either 8 or 9 times. And every year I collaborated with my daughter, Delilah. And she started very young doing this, and she was very interactive. We made these images together, and we made them each year, and we would do it probably when school would get out, and then they would have to be on the wall, I think around July or something like that. And now all of those images are now in the collection at the Miller, which I feel so privileged. So my legacy, double legacy with my daughter and with my work. And I feel that some of the work that we made together is our strongest moments as a family. And how much more can you get for a legacy than that, right? So thank you everyone that was involved in that and in your continued work with the community. So thank you.
I'm going to take a slightly different angle on this. When I was in California teaching, there was the earthquake happened my last year of grad school, and the highway was destroyed. And the state has a program where you have to, before you rebuild the highway, you have to dig archaeological sites there to make sure you're not losing anything. And they dug up a lot of 19th century privies that were blue collar workers that built Pullman railway cars in West Oakland. And I brought my art students out there just to look at what was left of what the legacy were for these anonymous people. And they would find little bottles and broken china, and all that represented someone's life that's forgotten for the most part. So I know for sure that 100 years from now, they're going to be finding broken glass on 2nd Avenue. And they'll say, I think there was a glass guy here. So I know that's a real legacy. That's a physical legacy. I think what our bones are left behind is kind of the ultimate legacy. I think we're all, though, ensured that our work is going to be the legacy, what we're making as artists. The product is out there, and I've been doing it for 40 years, and so things turn up, like Tony was saying, that you just can't imagine. I think that's the physical legacy that you have. Like right now, I'm desperately trying to find some of my grandfather's silver, and it's out there, and I've slowly been able to hold it for the first time, and it's a remarkable thing because that's that hand that gave it to you as well, but that's an object that represents that human being, and so that's the ultimate legacy we all have.
Did you turn it on?
It's on. Sorry.
Yes, obviously, the legacy would be, like you're saying, finding paintings in homes that you sold to them maybe 25, 30 years ago. But I also want one of my legacies to be, I hope, that somehow I've inspired other artists to do, yes, open the gallery, just give it a try. I think that would be important to me, to have that be one of my legacies.
I think what I'm doing right now, just because I'm just so hyper-focused on getting with the school year wrapping up, is, and again, what Tony said really resonated with me, that I want to teach these art and design, or I want to teach industrial processes through art and design to turn like young artists onto this lifestyle of what could happen. I mean, in the financials of going to school, they are what they are, but right now I want to bring in projects that I didn't get to do until I was in college, and projects that I've taught at colleges, and bring it down to a high school level, and they can learn these things, and it's not going to cost them a dime, and they can get turned on to that at a younger and younger age and have more time to hone those skills before they can even drive a car. I mean, I've got furniture design kids that just blow me away with what they're already doing at 15 or 16 years old, because we got them in there and got them started. So I'm hoping that there will be a batch of artists, that I'm hoping that there will be this constant sort of rejuvenation of the community through these endeavors. And I really liked what Jeremy was saying about physical legacy, did you say? Because with my chosen medium, especially when I'm working with steel, I try not to get hung up in the moment of like, how this piece, what does this piece mean? How is it going to be interpreted? Because ultimately, this piece is going to be out in the world. It's going to have the final word. It's going to outlast me. So I try not to get hung up on the super personal and just get it out into the world. So then there can be a physical legacy when I'm, not here physically myself.
I just want to say, lucky kids to have you.
I'm doing what I'm doing because I was a lucky kid.
I haven't thought that much about my legacy, if I'm honest about it. I can say that my approach to my entire career has been, there's no rules to how you make your work. Make your work the way you want to make it, and don't let somebody tell you what you have to do and what's right and what's wrong. And hopefully somebody will learn that from me, because I talk about it all the time. And there's so much to do. I mean, just in my medium alone, glass is a very new medium, and every year you're seeing something completely different. And hopefully somebody will learn from me that you can do that. Just go for it.
I think I'll go back to Abe Cohen, that I know he doesn't, pass away, that I'm sitting here, and he was a great influence on me. So I'll just share that I thought I was going to be an art teacher, and I was at Southwest High School in Green Bay for a semester, and I was very good at pottery. Our first year, and I don't remember the student, first year of our gallery, he came up to me and he said, I know you're not going to remember me, he said, but you really influenced me to go into art. And I was a real shy kid, and you took the time with me. And that really hit me. And every year he's come into the gallery, and last year he was married to introduce his wife, and I received a text from him this morning that she had passed away. And, it's all about humanity. My legacy would be, just this last Friday, it's not all about making art, it's about sharing your knowledge. And we had right on of Door County Writing Center, Art Speaks come. And we also had, that's an adult group that comes, but they, for the first time, we had a school from O'Connell Falls come. Half of them were art students and the other half were language. And what a collaboration. That's what this community is all about. And I think if we give, there's nothing better that we can affect people, and we'll never know how we affect them.
So we're going to transition to questions, and I think we have a microphone. Is this the one that we're going to run around? So if you raise your hand, Rebecca will bring the microphone to you, and remember to just wait until that comes to you, and then we'll wrap up in about 10 minutes.
I just want to first thank all of you for being here. This was really rewarding for me personally, and I could see from the looks on everyone's faces, very rewarding for everyone else. But Margaret, I want to address you and the whole panel, because when you were asked what one word, I heard community, hope, synchronicity. But Margaret, I want to let you know that your dreams of what you wanted to see for your legacy is already happening. When my daughter was 13 years old and was at Sevastopol High School, they did a major art contest. And we heard Margaret Atwood was going to be the judge. Lockwood, was going to be the judge. And Megan was so excited because she was valedictorian of her class. She was a great studier. She studied who you were, the whole bit. Well, she did this drawing of when she was 2 years old, holding a hose, and the water was going in a circle, and her belly was out in a circle, and her diaper was full of water. She won first place.
I remember it.
And she said, what you did is you took her aside and you talked to her about the function, first of all, the feeling of what she was feeling when she was 2 years old. You asked her if she remembered. I'll never forget her coming home and describing in detail why she won first place. Well, here we are. She's 45 years old now. Her dad did not want her to go into art because she could not make a living that way. So she got a biology degree, she got a psychology degree, she got a business degree. And where is she now? She's opening a little store, a little gallery, where she represents 43 Door County artists that are either new in their art or seasoned. And she, late at night, goes up into the attic and she takes what time she can to paint herself again. And Margaret, that's because of you. I mean, you were the one that inspired her. So thank you.
Thank you. Adam, you said in the beginning that this is a community of artists and that you could walk into the grocery store and see an artist. And as I look around this room, I look at the white birds, I look at the white panel, starting with myself, my whiteness, I don't see the grocery store in this space. And I'm just wondering if I could hear from each of you briefly about what that says about the artist community in Door County.
Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Charlotte. Okay. Yeah, I will make an attempt at answering. It'll be inadequate, but yeah, I think that I think every community faces real issues around accessibility when it comes to art and inclusion as well, and I think that there are things that. Well, let me say this. I think that the arts organizations that I know and interact with up here know that that's an issue. So that feels like a first step. And I think that there's also some efforts collectively and individually as arts organizations who are coming together to try to just have the conversations that are needed and to figure out how we can be more inclusive, how we can be more welcoming, how we can be more develop a broader sense of belonging, and that feels hopeful to me. Frankly, I mean, I think I hear you, and I think that this is something that many of us in the sort of arts organization space, the arts management, arts administration space, are wanting for Door County. And so I think that there's a position that we hold of responsibility to help our community become more inclusive, and there's no question that that's a priority. Again, inadequate, and it'll take time, and it's never going to be perfect. But I think it's a value that many of us hold very closely. And if anyone else wants to, yeah,
sorry, got one here. I think it takes a long time for the glacial change up here in some ways, and so the good news is Tony said we're all aging out, so that'll help. But that vacuum will be filled, and I think there's organizations, the theaters up here, the visiting artist programs are bringing people of color up here on a regular basis. And when I got exposed to Door County through Stephanie, and a lot of musicians have been exposed to Door County through the holiday music events, and a lot of those people move here. I'd say 100 years ago, this might be all white men. So that's something, but it does take a while for some of these things to happen, and to find those people, you just have to try a little harder. But I actually thought the same thing sitting here a little bit coming in, that it is not very reflective of that. And I do think that, what I've seen with the Dome House and the art school and the people that are coming in and out of there, and definitely the theaters, there's a lot more happening with programs and just trying to be more inclusive.
Jeremy?
Yeah.
You want to point me out to the crowd?
Monica? Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, do you have anything to just respond to that about? Up here, you're from Chicago, right?
Yes, sir.
So what's your opinion about, coming up here? And, we went, when we took our kids to Sevastopol, we were kind of shocked originally about the makeup of the school. But by the time they graduated Sevastopol, it changed dramatically. And there were many more Hispanic kids and African Americans there. So it does change. But being from Chicago, what do you think?
Well, when Cindy and I, my partner, moved up here 7 years ago, we came from the heart of the city. And we had everything. We had mosques, we had Greek churches, Catholic churches. I mean, there was just a ton of everything was different. Great food from everywhere. And she would bring me up here because she has a family home out there that her dad still lives in right now. And we would go around in town. I'd be the only person of color in the whole town down the street. And so when she wanted to move here to help take care of her folks, and this was a beautiful place, she wanted to live here. This was home to her. And was like, geez, we're moving into white bread country now. And honestly, I'm a Mexican. I'm a lesbian, and I'm moving to white bread. Boy, what's love doing, huh? I'm happy to be here as an artist. And Margaret Lockwood was the first artist that took me in.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very curious about process, and I just wonder if any of you have any interesting stories about a project or a commission or a collaboration that totally, or a different medium that kind of totally took you by surprise, and you don't have to all answer, but I mean, Suzanne spoke to that with her collaborative photography with Delilah, but so something that kind of really surprised you within your own medium. Because everybody can get kind of stuck in their ways and making the same pieces over, or similar pieces over and over again, but you all seem pretty dynamic, and I'm just curious about any particular stories.
It's kind of hard without visuals, but I did sculptural vessels for about 20 years, working with the same technique of pâté de verre, which is a type of glass casting that I do. And after 20 years, my dad passed away, and going through the mourning process, you know, I was angry, I was sad, all these things. And my childhood love was drawing faces. And I did it all the time, and that's why I wanted to go to school for art. And when I got caught up in my career creating glass vessels, I stopped drawing faces altogether. And I found myself with a lump of clay in my studio one night, just modeling a head out of nowhere and casting it in glass. And then it became this whole new body of work. And trust me, the galleries do not like it when you change your work that dramatically overnight. But it's taken 10 years, and now they're more popular than the vessels that I did for 20. But it was a very strange thing to start making a completely different body of work out of nowhere. But like I said, I work through my issues with my art.
Hey, I got if I can turn it's on. Okay. I was at Kansas City Art Institute, and I took this class, this drawing class, from this incredible woman. And she did these things where we were doing figure drawing, and she says, draw. Now sit in your neighbor's seat, until we went all the way around. And every time you went to your neighbor's seat, you saw what they saw. And it isn't necessarily what you see. And you add lines to it. By the time you got back to your own drawing, you were like, wow. Another lesson she did was, I want you to take your best medium and do this incredible figure, and we all put them up, and they were all very academic, and oh yeah, you're really good. Then she said, okay, take this seriously. I want you to do anything you want, just have fun. I was drawing with my feet, people were doing all these crazy things, and so we put it up on a different wall. These were boring and dull, and those were full of life, and they were awesome.
Thanks, Tony, and I'm gonna call it there because we'll all be around for a little bit to just talk and chat a little bit afterwards, but it is 8 o'clock. And I really want to thank all of you for joining us today. Thanks for spending your evening with us. And I want to thank this incredible group of artists for your honesty, your openness, the power that you brought to this conversation, and the insights that you gave us. So thanks to all of you. And if you could all help me thank them, I'd appreciate it.